to my channel. Yes, today is Wednesday. We all know Wednesday is spooky animation. But let's start with greetings. Come on. Always get ahead of ourselves. Hello, my name is Dean. I'll be your host. Your
guy in the chair.
And today, for spooky animation, we're going to be going over and enjoying the true Ouija board horror story. So, I hope you enjoy. So enjoy.
I never believed in the supernatural. I wanted to, but never felt afraid of it. Years spent scaring friends and watching horror movies that even my parents refused to watch. And each time I felt nothing. Not scared, just excited. If you were to ask any of my friends, they would tell you that I was the most fearless person they knew. I would make jokes about how I could summon the devil himself and he would be afraid of me. However, that all changed pretty quickly. My teacher had just reminded our class that there was a school excursion coming up. This was a Friday afternoon. That particular week, I became very interested in communicating with the dead and demon summoning rituals. This reminder from my teacher made me think of a clever prank I could play on my friends in order to scare them. I decided to purchase a Ouija board. I made a plan to bring it to the hotel we were all staying at in order to scare them, or at the very least, annoy them. I ended up ordering one right there, in class, before we left for the day. I found one pretty quickly, actually. An old wooden Ouija board for no more than 15 pounds. I told my friends and laughed at their reactions. Most of them were creeped out and got annoyed, but in a funny sort of way. They started joking around, saying how they would throw me out of the hotel with the Ouija board if I actually did bring one. However, one of my friends looked horrified as they told me just how bad of an idea it was. I told him that I didn't actually believe in ghosts and that this wouldn't actually work. Even if it did, I couldn't care less. I'm fearless, right? Luckily, the Ouija board would arrive in the mail on Saturday. I wasn't concerned about my parents saying anything about the Ouija board. They also don't believe in this stuff and will just label it as a useless wooden board. I was so excited when I woke up on Saturday, and the Ouija board had already come in the mail. I hugged it close, excited for all the fun I was going to have messing with my friends on our trip, and ran to the kitchen. I sat at the table and I opened it carefully. Inside was the slightly old wooden board with its metal pointer, and, to my surprise, there was a strange instruction guide full of text. I have 2 younger sisters, and just then they both walked through the kitchen. I had told them the night before about my plans for the Ouija board and that it would arrive that day. They both weren't too fond of the Ouija board being in the house and thought my idea was going too far, especially the youngest. She made sure to let me know that she wouldn't even touch the thing. They glanced over at me to see what I was doing, and once they saw the board, their faces turned to fright and they ran out of the room. As I read through the instructions, I had a strange feeling. Something didn't feel quite right. It creeped me out just a bit. There were so many rules, so many warnings and dangers filled the pages. I shook off the feeling of unease. At the time, I didn't realize just how important those rules were. Immediately after reading through the guide, I decided to play with the board. When beginning the session, I did all that I was supposed to. I followed all the rules written in the guide and stayed polite and calm when asking the spirits questions. But no matter how much I tried, nothing happened. I would try, wait, and then get nothing. Again and again, and still no response. Eventually, I got bored and ended it by saying goodbye. I left the board on the counter and continued on with my day. That evening, my mom and my 2 siblings went to the cinema, leaving me home alone. I didn't care. Being alone wasn't a big deal because I wasn't scared of anything. In fact, staying at home alone was one of my favorite things at the time. I was sitting in the living room just scrolling on my phone. That was until I heard a loud crash and bang. It made me jump. Did that come from the kitchen? I went to check what had happened. I was cautious and all, but still not scared. I assumed something had fallen on the floor. I looked in the kitchen to see what had fallen over. That's when it happened. We had a plastic rubbish bin in the corner of our kitchen, and just as I came around the corner, a plastic orange juice container shot out of the rubbish bin and exploded. It left the remnants of what was still inside of it as it sat in the rubbish bin all over. Brown, dripping, rotted orange juice stains scattered everywhere. And I mean everywhere. The walls, floor, tiles, everything was covered in this gross brown liquid. I dismissed it as a coincidence. There was a reasonable explanation for this, right? Something or other about how the juice breaks down and creates gas within the container, causing it to explode. Hadn't I seen something like that on TV once? I convinced myself that had to be it. I managed to clean up most of it and decided that I would just wait for my mom to come back home to help me with the rest of it. At the time, my mom laughed about it and remarked about what powerful juice that was. But now, I don't laugh about it. This was just the beginning, and what came next will haunt me forever. That night, I had such horrid nightmares. I can't begin to explain them. I remember lots of mumbled noises and blood. Lots of blood. Blurred visions of violence and then darkness. This wasn't normal. I barely experience nightmares, and when I do, they are usually something dumb or stupid. That night, I didn't sleep well at all. But again, I didn't think too much of it. Sunday was when I began packing for the trip. I placed the Ouija board in my suitcase and left the suitcase in front of my bed so that I wouldn't forget it the next day. As I was getting ready for bed, something seemed odd. You know how you just get that gut feeling sometimes that something is really wrong? Again, I blew it off thinking it was just anxiety about tomorrow's big trip. But boy, was I wrong.
Bored.
The night was cold. I could hear the wind blowing outside my window as I drifted to sleep and slipped into the abyss of my mind. My dreams were again loud and frustrating. Just like the night before, there was blood. This time there were
There's
screams.
so much
The whole dream was
blood.
foggy and unidentifiable, but it felt like something was spawning, a corruption. I woke up breathing heavily, as if I had been holding my breath. I was sweating, not just a little bit. No, I was drenched in sweat. I was barely awake and already my skin was crawling as I stared at the ceiling, catching my breath. I closed my eyes and did my best to calm down, knowing that it was over. The nightmare was done. I lifted my head and looked around my room. It was dark and silent, apart from the fan that was always running in my room. I reached for my phone and checked the time. 2:50 a.m. That made my skin crawl again. It was almost 3 a.m., and even though I never believed in the 3 a.m. haunting hour crap, something didn't feel right. The air felt thick, and I felt like something was watching me. I sat up, and to my horror, there was something there in the dark with me. For a second, I couldn't move. I was trying to understand what I was looking at. I blinked, and there, on top of my big suitcase, sat the figure of a girl. I could see her so perfectly. I could see her hair and her feet. She was staring at me. I barely had time to process this before I realized there was someone else in the room. Right beside her stood an outline of a tall man. He stood very still, but I knew he was there. I reacted by grabbing my blankets and throwing them over my head. I sat there under the bed covers and tried to remain completely still. My heart hurt from just how hard it was beating. Was I having a heart attack? What was this feeling? It was at that moment that I realized I was feeling pure fear. The kind of fear I have never felt before in my entire life. This can't be right. I must still be in my nightmare. I began counting my fingers. There were 10. I was awake. My mind raced. I knew whatever that was not real. I have to be hallucinating or something. But how do I know for sure? I thought of grabbing my phone and using that as a light. But if those beings were real, it would be more terrifying to see their true forms under such dim light. I decided to count to 3, and on 3, I would run to the door and turn on the lights. 1, 2. I was stuck on 2. My mind hurt. Then finally, 3. I threw the blankets off my head and jumped out of the bed. As soon as my feet hit the ground, I started to run toward my light switch. I winced at the pain from my feet as the pins and needles shot through my legs. I was fully awake. My legs were not. As I ran, even though I felt like I was going fast, what I saw will forever be ingrained in my mind. It was the eerie figure of the girl sitting perfectly still on my suitcase, with her head slightly tilted in my direction, and the tall man beside her. He just stared blankly at my bed. I made it to the lights and turned them on. Sure enough, there was nothing there. I felt relieved, but not entirely. Whatever that was, it terrified the crap out of me. I did not sleep that night. I didn't want to wake up to those things that night or ever again. I had the lights on for the rest of the night. I tried to distract myself by doing random things around my room, but something in me told me, destroy that Ouija board. The thought echoed in my mind throughout the night. Eventually, I couldn't take it any longer. I was losing my battle to stay awake. Nothing had happened for a while. It had to be a fluke. I decided to lie down and try to relax. I shut down my phone and lay there in my bed, perfectly still. Suddenly, I began to hear the loudest cracking noises. It made me jump. I thought it was my phone since something similar had happened in the past, where my phone's screen began to crack all of a sudden. I looked up and grabbed my phone. It was fine. The noise was gone. I looked around the room. I looked at my mirror. It wasn't my mirror. I checked my window. Still nothing. However, when I replayed that sound in my mind, I realized that it sounded more like the sound you often hear in a movie when someone breaks a bone. I wasn't watching a movies. No one was. Everyone in the house was asleep, except me. That freaked me out once again, so I did not move from my bed. My whole body was shaking. I tried to watch TikTok to distract myself. I stayed like that for another hour or so. Then, after gaining some kind of bravery, I decided to get back up and try to work out. Maybe that would distract me. The time was 4:30 a.m. As I was getting into comfy clothes, I heard the loudest sound of a train. The sound was so loud it made my head shake. I live in the countryside where there are no trains whatsoever. That pushed me over the edge. I grabbed everything and jumped back into my bed. Although I feel pretty dumb saying this, I began to pray. I prayed hard and wished that all of this would be over. It was nearly 5 a.m. I needed to get up. I wanted to surprise my mom with a gift before going to school. It was her birthday, but I was scared out of my mind and didn't want to be alone. I had to wake up my little sister and use a lie. I told her, I need your help to decorate the living room for Mom's birthday. It worked. I felt much better being with someone, even if it was my little sister. It wasn't long before my mom woke up and came downstairs. I sang her the happy birthday song and I gave her her present. As we sat in the living room together, I couldn't hold in my fear. I told my mom what happened. I tried my best to make it sound as lighthearted as I could so that she wouldn't be scared. When I was done telling her what happened, my mom had a horrified look on her face. That further confirmed that I had a reason to be scared. I kind of laughed it off by saying something like, I haven't slept since 2:50 a.m. Guess the spirits really did want to talk with me after all. But that didn't make me feel better. My mother suggested getting rid of the board. I was way ahead of her. I got a plastic bag, put the Ouija board and all of its parts inside of it, and told her to throw it away as far as possible from us. I couldn't even bring myself to watch her walk out the door with it. I must say, though, the moment it was out of my room, I felt relief, as if a thick air that once made it hard to breathe had been cleared out. I wanted to take a shower before I left, but I got so scared at the thought of being alone in the shower, I broke down. I began crying. My mom hugged me tight and calmed me down. I eventually calmed down, but I ended up not showering. I just sat there cuddling with my mom right up to the moment I needed to leave for my school trip. The trip was fairly uneventful in comparison to the weekend before. My friends were surprised that I didn't bring the Ouija board. I just told them that my parents didn't want me to bring the board and they believed me. The best part, I slept just fine on the trip. No nightmares, no weird happenings, no creepy girls in the middle of the night. I felt fine and no longer felt scared of being alone. It wasn't until I came back home that things changed. When I walked into my room, something felt off again. I couldn't put my finger on it. It was unnerving being in there. I expected to see the Ouija board like some scene from a horror movie where the haunted object just reappears as if by magic, but that never happened. I do have severe PTSD now. I can't sleep in complete darkness, so there's always a light on in my room. I'm so terrified of being in my room alone that my parents had to move my youngest sister into my bedroom to give me peace of mind. Just 2 days ago, I brought up the Ouija board to my sister, and she told me something that made me sick. She said that ever since that day, she would sometimes have strange dreams. They were always the same. She's sitting in an empty room with a giant clock in front of her, and at exactly 2:50 a.m., the tall, shadowy figure of a man and a girl sitting on the ground would suddenly appear and stare at her, as if they were looking directly into her soul.
That's why you don't do it. Hey guys, now that's what you call creepy. That's why I don't go mess with Ouija boards, and you shouldn't either. It may not work the first three or a couple of times you try, but it costs something. So you don't want to get something you can't get rid of. The hell no. Excuse my language, but no, just no. That devil worshiping crap. No. Stay away. But if you like what you saw, don't forget to like it, comment down below, and then finally subscribe and hit the notification bell to be notified every time I post a new video and share. Bye.